algorithmizing intelligence, shooting someone in the crotch with a cannonball, thrust, propulsion. It's science-y.
Why you always gotta be blowing my spot up like that? There are my runes. There they are. I'm not mad. Science needs art and art needs science. They both need each other to function properly.
There are ways to figure out what the paper is really saying.
And then I'm ready to get on Twitter and yell at people about doing their own research on...
Oh, hold on there, sports fan.
Kyle Hill, everybody! He's the next generation of science communicator. I'm gonna be too old at a certain point to do those terrible things to my body, and it'll be up to you.
He's got like a lion's mane. This guy's amazing. Kyle Hill.
I'm Goo Rambo.
The universe is indifferent to you. Whether or not you have amazing hair, the universe doesn't care.
How are trees pushing past this pressure limit? Ah! Behold, my balls.
Chat, welcome once again. Welcome once again to another partly debunking, partly acknowledging perhaps a tragedy of education stream about Terrence Howard. I don't want to talk about the man. I wish I didn't have to. But there was a new podcast with Mr. Howard and Mr. Rogan. And, sorry. These are the first words I've spoken today. And given that Mr. Rogan has such an enormous platform, I figured that since we did the first one, we should do the second one. And I think you'll be surprised about this podcast appearance specifically, because I think this is what they should have went with. Chat, welcome. All my newbies, you can see it right here. Screen in the chat. James, Monkey King, George, Kevin Kraft, Drew, Elko, Glub, 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 Glub. Of course, chat, if you want to join me every day for all the science we get up to here at La Facilidad, that's patreon.com/Kyle Hill. Join our private Discord. Ask me questions any of all days. I'll be sitting here waiting for your pings. That's what I do. Or if you really, really, really want me to see something today as we go through Mr. Howard's appearance, you can try Super Chat, as you're seeing up on the screen. Kyle, you're looking sexy. Don't objectify me. Unless I ask. You can try Super Chat. Like Anko with the 10. Hey, Kyle, just wanted to say thank you for fighting misinformation and for fighting for scientific literacy. I always look forward to all your videos, but live streams are a special treat. Hey, there's a special treat. Now, chat, we are going to have to do a lot of context today. Ooh, she stayed on my waves till I'm conjugating. Chat, calm down. Just calm down, okay? I have no less than 30 timestamps from this 4-hour-long video. You do a great Australian accent, now try a New Zealand accent? No, I don't think I will. We have no less than 30 timestamps from this 4-hour-long video. Are we going to get to it? Probably not. But, like I said, this made me change my mind about Terrence Howard a little bit. Not in that what he's saying is true, but in how he was received the first time around, and what that means for science, and science communication, and education. So I think this is an interesting exploration that you and I are going to go on today. I don't know if it's going to be the standard 1 hour. We'll see what happens. Joe brought him to talk with Eric Weinstein because Eric saw Terrence's cared about it and is self-taught. He wanted to show him what others refused to. I want to hear what Kyle thinks. Well, that's the thing. We have to set up some context for who Terrence Howard is, who Eric Weinstein is. But I do have positive things to say. You listen to Eric a little bit. Well, I don't agree. Chat, we'll get into it. I don't agree with a lot of things about Eric Weinstein and his platform. But how he interacted with Terrence, he had some good points. Kyle, talk about the brew video. Oh yeah, chat. Kyle's hair is magnificent, I have to say. I mean, come on. Yes, chat, if you're unaware, TJ York, sorry, 1 second. TJ York with a $4.99. Let's be here to analyze the science, not the, scientist. Thank you, TJ, for the double back-to-back 4.99s. Eric Weinstein, my bad. I thought it was Berenstein Bears. That's my fault. Oh, right. So there's also a video going around that's calling both me and Game Theory out, saying I was wrong about my Fallout rule of thumb video, but we'll get to that later. This is more people are going to tune into this and want to see what we're talking about. Kyle the Gray now. Guys, come on. You know it's appealing. Speaking of appealing, let's get into this onion of an interview. Absolutely nailed it. Chat, do we keep the sweet baseline background music or do we turn it down? I think we turn it down for this. We're not going to focus unless it's down. Okay, chat. Now let's just get some audio levels. We'll get some audio levels right. Okay. So here is Mr. Terrence Howard. You know him from stage and from screen. Little context about him. When I say when I eventually will say something like there's parts in this where I feel bad for him, or where he makes good points, or Mr. Weinstein makes good points. I'm talking about his points and his obvious love of education specifically. Terrence Howard personally is known for acting, tax evasion, and serial abuse. So when I say if I say that I feel sorry for him, or I give some of his points credibility or something like that, I'm not talking about him as a person. I have there's good arguments that say he's not a great person. Did I mute my microphone? No. Did you already talk about the Tyson response video? I thought it was, I left a comment on that video. So I'm not commenting. We are focusing specifically on the comments that he makes and how he is interacting on this podcast. That's it. Okay. Okay. Now the person that he's talking with, thanks, Chompy, for definitely not making that worse. Help me, Thor. I'm stuck on Moog. What strategy is best for him according to science? Use bleed. Einstein. Guys, anyway, the person that he's talking with, who Joe Rogan brought in to speak with him, is a PhD, a mathematics PhD from Harvard. I will say that Eric, I disagree with Dr. Eric's politics. I disagree with a lot of what he has said in the past, specifically about COVID. I disagree with what his brother has said and done on his large platform. But it must be said that though his scientific career in academia didn't go very far, Eric is definitely a very smart guy. And he does a good job making Terrence Howard face facts here, which is interesting. So all that this is all context, okay? So I don't necessarily agree with either of these men's entire lives, but you shouldn't have to agree or disagree with someone's entire life to hear their ideas out in an open forum like this one and comment on it, all right? Terrence felt super defensive at times. We'll get into it. What's interesting is that by the end of this, Terrence is challenged so much that he seems a little vulnerable, which I think any good learner should be vulnerable to new ideas. I like the bare naked choke analogy. Yeah, that was really good. So let's get into it, okay? Not guilt by association, but his brother Brett is bad. Yeah, okay. So we have, look, chat. I know there's a lot of newbies in the chat, and there's a lot of our regulars in the chat. We're gonna try to stay on track here. But again, I'm not talking about this man's life. I'm not talking about Eric's politics. All I'm talking about is an interesting situation where obviously a very creative person smashes up against the rocks of reality. Okay? So let's do this. I'm going to... Let's pause our music and let's get into it because I have 30 points here. Vishanti with the 5. Terrence doesn't get that common language doesn't apply to math language. Yeah, so the issue, and you'll see Eric point this out numerous times, that Terrence is infusing language and metaphor and things into geometry and mathematics where it shouldn't otherwise be, and it leads him to weird conclusions, but we'll get to that. The first point, beep, is right here. And you'll forgive me, I woke up at 6 a.m. and I watched 4 hours of this. So I may not remember which each clip is, but all of them are interesting, okay? Yeah, but we want Kyle to say his credentials. Bad habit. I'm a award-winning science educator, nuclear communications consultant, White House science communication consultant, Zaddy, obviously. I have degrees in engineering and communication theory. That's me, okay? That's me, but it shouldn't, like we're going to go through with Howard, it shouldn't necessarily matter what his background is if he has good ideas. The problem is presenting those ideas, okay? Yeah, Zaddy, look at the gray. Look at that. My jawline stops here, chat. But Arya likes the gray, so I keep it. Anyway, first clip.
Was disingenuous.
Is this loud enough? Is this loud enough? In this clip, Terrence is saying, he's talking about Neil deGrasse Tyson's response to him.
Guys, may I make a recommendation? Let's start with the ideas, because I think we all care about those.
Yes, for sure. But hold, please, because this is an important thing.
So now he's talking about, it's good. Okay, so this is a direct response from Mr. Howard to Neil deGrasse Tyson's response, and now has like 10 million views or something like that.
He was so disingenuous because I sent him a long email after he sent me back the red line thing, thanking him for reviewing it and saying, look forward to when we can discuss these things, because I sent the treatise to him so we could discuss that on the show. His whole point was, I'm going to bring you on my show and we're going to talk. So here's the stuff that we're going to talk about.
Okay, so now this is kind of fair, where Terrence's point is that he didn't actually communicate with him after dismissing his thesis. And to Joe Rogan's point, he makes a fine point here.
That I would like to talk about. He never followed up from that point forward, just sent one-line emails. Any other thing you got to go to somebody else. So he's pretended like...
Communication theory, Kyle, is that any better than gender studies? First of all, everyone gets one. That's your one. Then you're out. Second of all, if you want to see my master's degree, I can pull it down from the wall if you want.
Like, oh, I was trying to be, very helpful, but that's not what the email trails show.
So he did make this one very large response, though.
So this is the video many of you may have seen.
Right.
From Neil.
He did. He did go over the treatise, all the red line stuff. He only has so much time. He might be in a position to defend him, that he might be in a position where he's like, look, I just said what I said about all this stuff. Good luck. But I don't have the time to sit here and discuss these things in depth. That's
totally fair. I think that is a fair point where we'll get into it. Eric later on makes a really interesting point about Neil being a little disingenuous with the peer review thing that he told Terrence to seek out. But it is a totally fair point where a working scientist or a public educator or a public figure only has so many hours in the day. And just because you don't have an opportunity to go through a 36 or 30-page treatise, whatever it is, doesn't necessarily mean you're dismissing that person out of hand. And that's a fair point, right? But you can see where Terrence would be a little bent out of shape about that. Our next clip, this is going to be hard to scrub through because it's a 4-hour-long video over here.
Doing much research, people who are, pushing crazy agendas in public without a recognition that their colleagues don't think much of what they're doing. I mean, this is a very complicated story that
Now, he's absolutely right. What Terrence has found himself in the middle of is that he is poking at this question that is very popular, and especially in the United States right now, that why can't I present my ideas? Why are scientists and academics these, ivory tower figures? And what if I'm just asking questions? Why won't you listen to me? And what it harkens back to a lot of the time is this myth of the lone genius. And something important here, I think what Neil said, I really liked what Neil said in his video. He said, yes, geniuses are often misunderstood. But just because you're misunderstood does not mean you're a genius. And so there is some line, and this is what Terrence has to figure out how to do. There is some line in which you have to walk and integrate both sides of this conversation, right? You have to figure out how to get, academics to listen to you by speaking their language. And you will also have to present your ideas in a way such that people can understand them, right? Yes, Medusa, I'm aware of Eric's interesting background, but that's not what we're talking about here.
Terrence has walked into. And I have to think about my colleagues, and I have to think about how they hear things, what they will say. And so I am in part speaking to your audience, but I'm also partially speaking to 1,000 people who are seeing this at a different level.
Exactly. So what we're going to come back time and time again is that if you want to be taken seriously, part of it is speaking the language that academia and scientists already understand, and not coming to them like you already know everything and you're trying to overturn everything they've done. Whether your idea is good or not, you're not having a good conversation. You're trying to teach something that you believe rather than engage, you know? Kyle, while on the subject, can I ask you what you think of Eric at the end, especially about the hostility within the academic community and what peer reviews actually are? Yeah, we'll get to that. I thought that was quite interesting. Not that I necessarily agree with everything, but we'll get to that. So next clip. Oh, man. You'll see that I was paying attention a lot near the beginning, and then we're going to skip ahead a lot. Next clip.
1 × 1 = 2.
Okay. So obviously the easiest thing to make fun of here about Mr. Howard is that he wrote a whole paper explaining why 1 × 1 = 2. Now, an interesting thing here is that after this, in this interview specifically, he very much pulls back from that claim and says multiple times that it's a metaphor, which Eric challenges him on, and calls out Joe for not challenging him on, which is interesting.
And what he forgot is when I say 1 × 1 = 2, that's a metaphor for challenging the status quo, despite the fact that the square root of 2 has all of its issues when you cube it or you multiply it by 2.
So, see that little smile from Eric there? It's because he's letting him speak at length, and just kind of say his piece. And when Mr. Howard he's obviously backpedaling from 1 × 1 = 2. That is incorrect. And what Neil did in his piece, and what Eric won't do as much, is saying, well, you have the fundamentals incorrect, so everything else you're saying, I'm not going to spend too much time on. What Eric goes on to do is try to evaluate anything from what he's saying and see if there's any interesting thing in this whole arc, this whole flower of life thing that Mr. Howard is getting at. So I think that is a bit fairer, but it is hard. It is hard to get past the 1 × 1 thing. And Eric will say that later on. It's like, you led with the worst possible statement you could, because it makes everyone think that you're crazy. And I should point out, when he says there's a problem with the square root of 2, we went through this last time, where he doesn't realize basic mathematical operations when you can you can multiply the square root of 2, you can cube it, you can square it, and you can still get similar answers. That's just because he's not taking into account normal mathematical operation, which he has problems with. He has a problem with multiplication in the first place. So yeah, let's continue. Next clip.
Which creates a contradiction, despite the fact that the square root of 2 has a problem with the prime numbers, the fact that they call number 2 a prime number, when it's clearly a composite number. Any other prime number, and I'll jump into this, any prime number that you subtract from another prime number, you always get a composite number, except with the situation of the number 2. And there's so many people and that's why the prime numbers are unpredictable.
Okay, this is just him going on his piece. Remember, I went through this at 6 a.m. That wasn't anything. But obviously he has problem with mathematics in general, and thinks everyone is using the wrong thing. Next clip.
Your best foot forward, because if you say 1 times 1 equals 2, everybody knows that that's crazy. But what you actually may mean, and the fact that you don't use certain terms, or the fact that you use certain pronunciations.
Now, this is very interesting. Now, what Eric realizes is that Terrence is obviously self-taught, and he points out something interesting here that I didn't think about. Stone Cold Steve Autism is one of the best names I've ever seen, Chet. Eric Weinstein made Kyle look like a moronic hater who looked at Terrence's first video and made a video hating on you got deleted. If you go back and watch my first video, Chet, I believe in our first video to this, I was giving Mr. Howard a lot of benefit of the doubt. I was pointing out where I thought he was wrong, and I said nothing about him personally. I wasn't hating on the man, was I? Was I, Chet? Pretty sure I wasn't. But this is interesting about the self-taught thing.
That communicate to me something very positive, which is that you taught yourself. You learned this stuff from reading about it, because nobody taught you, or you wouldn't pronounce certain words the way you pronounce them.
True. See, so he notices that even when Mr. Howard speaks, he's not saying scientific terms and words like you'd usually say, like he's only read them. He's never heard anyone say them before. And that indicates to him that he's self-taught. Now, like I said about being more charitable to Mr. Howard's ideas, not necessarily the man himself, self-teaching yourself all of this stuff and being this interested in it does take a lot of mental work. Okay?
True.
Yeah.
True,
so, in part, you always have the ability to make fun of somebody who pronounces a word the way it's read on the page. And then you also have the opportunity to say, holy cow, that guy actually taught himself. That's more impressive. And
right.
so
I agree. And what I'm going to basically end up saying throughout this piece is that it is impressive the amount that Mr. Howard has tried to learn. His application of that is on the whole incorrect, it seems like. But how far he's gone with it is interesting. It is interesting. There is another factor here, the fact that he is a rich actor. Means that there are less people in his life that would actually check him on these things, if there are people at all. So that's how some of these ideas can mutate. You have an interesting nub of truth, a geometric shape or square root of 2, and you just sit there by yourself, and it just mutates without checks and balances into something unrecognizable. Let's go to our next clip. We're going to jump ahead a little bit, because this is about 30 minutes of him trying to get the correct thing on screen.
Of regard to all energy being, and I thought.
Okay, so this is where things start to break down.
In what I was reasoning with regard to all energy being expressed in motion, all motion being expressed in waves, all waves being curved, and that there were no straight lines in the universe. So I was like,
there's several errors in what you just said. If I stop there, we'll get off track again.
Yeah, but you should correct.
This is the first time he's really being pushed back against. There are several errors in what you just said. And when he said all energy is expressed in motion, That's not true, as you'll see from Eric in a second. And then there's no straight lines in the universe. Again, also not true. And as we go through this video, you'll see kind of Terrence is being broken down bit by bit until he becomes quite vulnerable in his ideas, and he keeps going back to things that he's obviously told himself over and over again. And it kind of, you kind of see the system, the system malfunctioning a little bit, which is which could be a good indicator that he's trying to incorporate new information. Who knows?
Those errors while we're there.
Okay, it is not true that all energy is expressed in motion.
What energy is not expressed in motion?
Potential energy is not expressed in motion. If I have a
So that's correct, right? If you're talking about the different kinds of energy you have, chemical energy or potential energy doesn't involve motion. Chemical energy doesn't involve motion. Chemical energy is what happens when bonds break and electrons change position in atoms and molecules. And potential energy is like what Eric is about to say, like holding a spring in tension. There is potential energy in this springy hair tie that doesn't involve any actual motion as defined typically by physics. Musashi with the 10, any geniuses like Eric having to spend years on YouTube to convince you he is a genius is just a make-believe scam artist instead of having anything worth to show. I'm not saying anything else about Eric's personal theories. I'm just saying how he's interacting with Mr. Howard here. And I think he does do, at the end of the day, a pretty good job. Matt Computer Scientist with the 10. Thank you. Let's keep going. So that was Mr. Howard's first crash against reality here. Let's continue on a little bit later. Again, it's hard to scrub because this is such a long video.
Frequency?
no.
There's nothing moving.
Let me show you what goes wrong in the interaction.
Okay.
Terrence says, "Show me in nature a single straight line."
Okay.
And I liked your point about Euclidean women. That was awesome.
that was from Alan Watts.
All right. So, if I show this,
Delete my messages all you want. You obviously don't like criticism. What are you talking about? You don't notice the things that Eric noticed. Don't delete them. You just hated on the guy, which is why I said you're not smart enough. What are you talking about? Who am I hating on? What did I say? Guys, I'm impressed to see the pushback from someone on a Joe Rogan podcast. It says Alex with the $4.99. Yeah. As we will continue to say.
to Terrence, because I just bought this from the end of the 7th ray.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of
And-
straight lines.
A lot of straight lines. Now, Terrence is
Or
going to
what
say,
you would think is a straight
You
line.
see,
but when you
exactly.
look at it under an electron microscope, you're going to see the crystalline structure. So again, this configuration is an
It's
illusion.
not, you're just saying it's not perfect.
It's an optical illusion because
It's not an optical illusion. What Eric is trying to point out here is it's like a reductio ad absurdum argument where Mr. Howard keeps going, well, that looks like a straight line, but this, that may look like a straight line, but that. He never actually engages with the idea.
crystals form.
And that's what Eric is pointing out here. Let's continue on, because that happens again, which is, again, just watch the evolution of this conversation as it goes on. This is 4 hours.
flower of life. I can
Yeah,
try
I
to.
would love that. But like with the flower, all of these things, I went up to Oxford 8 years ago and tried to present them there to be examined. They didn't want to take me seriously.
Because you keep coming at it
Because
in
the
the way
one
that you're
times
doing.
one, when I said the one times one, but like I said, that was a metaphor to say
Terrence, nobody hears it that
something's
way.
wrong.
Terrence, nobody hears it that way. So, again, I think especially in American culture, we want there to be like the lone genius who upends the whole establishment. I think we root for the underdog, and we root for people that can take it to the elite and stuff like that. But like I said at the beginning of this video, there has to be engagement with the edifice that you're trying to get into or trying to dismantle or disprove. You have to show them in their own language what you think is incorrect. And if you show up to Oxford and say 1 × 1 = 2, it is not surprising no one wants to hear what you have to say. It is like showing up to a ethics convention as Ted Bundy. I know enough to know that you're not going to have a lot of things to add to this conversation. You know what I mean? So there is, whether you like it or not, there is some barrier to entry in science, which Eric will mention later on in a negative way, which is interesting. But there is a barrier to entry that you must prove to us that you have done the similar amount of mental effort and you understand what we're trying to get at when we're trying to understand reality. Otherwise, no one's going to take you seriously. Now, and especially if you want to be taken seriously, that's what I would focus on the most, right? But it's this idea of I know everything and you know nothing, or I'm going to upend everything Einstein ever did. It's an enormous claim, and it's not surprising. I think Terrence is trying to say like, oh, no one will listen to me. Well, because you're speaking the wrong language. No one can understand you. And that's not surprising.
Something's wrong, but they know something's wrong with the math. It's not adding up.
You bring up renormalization theory a lot.
Right.
Renormalization.
Okay, so what Eric does is get into a lot of mathematics here because he has a PhD in mathematics. But that's neither here nor there for that point. Let's skip ahead to we're now an hour in, and this is when Mr. Howard starts talking about his geometry and what it might mean. And Eric gets into that. Noah Leidenbaum with the 5. Do you think Terrence Howard rejects the concept of formalized mathematical proofs or simply doesn't know what they are and how to write one? Thank you, Noah. No, he says later on that his geometry proves itself. Because his claim is that if the shape is correct and their interactions are correct, then that proves the mathematical underpinnings, which, of course, isn't necessarily true. Craig Christ, I remember that song, with the 10, just to point out, 2 high school students recently came up with a new proof for the Pythagorean theorem. Actual lone geniuses are actually recognized as such today. Well, even in those cases, those kids are going through school and interacting with people and having their ideas challenged and being encouraged by good teachers. And when I mentioned like a tragedy of education at the beginning, you do get the sense that Mr. Howard really wants to learn and really wants to come up with interesting things. But there's no discipline pointing his mind in the right direction. You know, Kyle, can you explain to us what Eric was talking about with the hairy ball theory at 150? Yes. Well, he was just using the. Well, we can, Banshee. I'll answer you quickly. What Eric does throughout this geometry piece here is just show how you can get these shapes by intersecting spheres, and they don't have to have anything to do with vortices or electromagnetism or anything that Mr. Howard is talking about. You can just take 8 spheres and make these shapes, and he was just using a fruit to show that. Let's get on to this clip.
I can see it, please.
So, you know, the problem, Terrence, is that you have a desire to go immediately towards what this means, right? And before you get to what it means, people don't even know what it is.
True.
Right? So
when you start giving meaning to the things that you're finding, your theory, it's beautiful. And these shapes are really cool. When your theory is beautiful and you think it has meaning and it has meaning for you personally, then you start shaping things around that. And that's dangerous, right? Gamers with the 5, as an educator, in cases like these, not to be rude, is it a waste of time trying to baby things down when presented with blatantly ridiculous ideas? Now, I don't think what he's doing is blatantly ridiculous. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things that he is concerning himself with. What I would do, what I would do as an educator, and what Eric kind of tries to do, again, I don't agree with everything about Eric, but what he does well in this is try to find the places that Mr. Howard is presenting something interesting, even if it might not be in the right language. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, Vsauce has a good video on that.
I'm going to claim is I've got these.
Okay, so now he has the hairy ball fruit. He's just showing how 8 spheres, if you take 8 spheres or just some number of spheres and you intersect them, and then you highlight all the empty space in that intersection, then you get these shapes. There's nothing necessarily amazing about that or interesting. It's just the beauty, the inherent beauty of this shape that I think Mr. Howard is getting stuck on. If you want another example, think of a number of plastic balls, and you put all those plastic balls into a box, just a cardboard box. You know, and we know that packing theory is a hard thing. You know that when all those balls settle, that there's going to be some air in there, right? Some spaces in between the spheres. I think the best spherical packing is like 72%, something like that. But close the box up and then remove everything, and you will get these shapes. Everything, all the empty space, and you'll get shapes like this. That's cool. And you could see art being made from that. But it's in imbuing these shapes with meaning that you need to prove. You know what I mean? The Tesseract Shadow is my Roman Empire now. Thanks for helping me. It says autosave with the $4.99. You're welcome. You're welcome. Let's keep moving on. Where are we now? It's going to get a little bit easier to scrub as we go here. Next one.
The next one next to it. Wow, I shouldn't have done that.
Okay. So what's going on is that, for example,
F in the chat. F in the chat.
Wow, I shouldn't have done that.
okay. So what's going on is that, for example,
Maybe the CIA has something to do with this, chat.
it's incredibly
Turn
cool.
it around, Jamie, so they can see it, please.
Let's see.
For example,
Wow,
Okay,
I shouldn't
okay.
have done that.
Here we go.
okay. So what's going on is that, for example,
Bingo.
is that
Thank you.
Neil can't figure out, well, where did this come from? So what it is spheres of radius root 2 at the 8 vertices of a cube.
Okay, so one of the things that Neil deGrasse Tyson said in his rebuttal, and you can watch that rebuttal, has millions of views now, was that he has no idea where these shapes came from, but they're beautiful. Thanks for your time, Mr. Howard. What Eric is now pointing out is what I just pointed out, which is what Terrence did is take intersecting spheres and then remove them and see what the interstices, what the empty space looks like geometrically. And that's interesting. So Eric is saying, well, Neil, that's how you get these. I think Neil understood that. I think what Neil is actually saying is, why did you do that? Because Mr. Howard is saying these shapes have meaning and purpose. Why did you do that? And that's unexplained. I think that's the problem. Tim Gracie with the 10, it's a waste of time if you assume you have something better to be doing. Helping someone understand the science behind any phenomenon is beneath your objectives. That's what you're assuming. Yeah, I mean, but not everyone has the time, as Joe said. I watched the entire 4 hours. Eric gets real towards the end, and he does a good job of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah, no, we'll get to that. He gets pretty real with Mr. Howard, and I like that. Okay, so he explains what I just said, which is you take the spheres and you put them together. But why do you put them together? And then this is where Mr. Howard really starts to break down. You can tell he doesn't have the language to really explain what he's trying to explain.
Go to him right now.
taking a drink of whiskey, of course.
Shout out to all the homies right now trying to figure out what the fuck's going on.
I do appreciate Joe for that. It's like he does acknowledge, like, shout out to everyone trying to figure out what the heck these guys are talking about. I think that was the reason I chose that clip. Because at least he's acknowledging that this is hard to get through. And this is also what Eric will acknowledge in just a second. Where was I? Oh, here we are.
Might not be correct,
Like they
but there's
could
only one way
say-
to find
Well,
out.
there's a difference between, you see, Terrence has much greater odds of contributing to the world of engineering than he does to the world of mathematics. I mean, the odds that he's doing something new in mathematics, I'll be blunt, are very, very small.
Even though I have patents on it that shows that all of this is
I
novel.
don't want to go there. The patents
F in the chat. While this buffers, yeah, I mean, it's true. When he shows these interesting geometric shapes and he's trying to come up with drones and other ideas, there is a lot more F's in the chat. It's the CIA. They're trying to stop us. There's a lot more open ground. But as Eric is pointing out, there's not a lot of open ground in mathematics as Mr. Howard is claiming it is. Krieger with the 50. Creativity can surpass factual knowledge but ignore deeper truths. The Dunning-Kruger effect shows that while some may feel confident with partial information, they fail to see their mistakes. Genuine wisdom understands complexities beyond their beliefs. Love you, Kyle. Love you too. Thank you for the 50. Which is kind of what Joe was saying. And yes, I know I should have downloaded this beforehand, but I didn't. F's in the chat. I didn't do it. It's a long video.
But there's only one way to.
Even
do not speak to what you think that they speak.
that shows that all of this is
I
novel.
don't want to go there. The patents do not speak to what you think that they speak to.
That's okay.
And look, you can see into my heart. I'm not trying to.
No.
All right.
But we were talking. I told you that
Yeah.
they produce a supersymmetrical structure.
When
that,
you say supersymmetry, I don't know that you know what a supersymmetry is.
You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. And this is one of the other major times where Eric will push back against Mr. Howard. And that is what Mr. Howard does a number of times. Using language, using scientific terms that have specific meanings in a way that doesn't make sense. And when you do that, no one is going to take you seriously. It's like you have what Mr. Howard is doing is trying to speak without any grammar. You know what I mean? He has ideas and he has terms and he's obviously read about a lot of people and scientific theories and stuff like that, but he has no training. He doesn't have the grammar to put the sentences and the terms and ideas together in the right order. And so when he speaks, you have this feeling that's like, okay, there's words that I recognize, but I don't get it. And that's because he doesn't have the training, the grammar in what he's saying, you know? Let's continue on a little bit further. F's in the chat. We can even push this down even further just in case here.
the world of physics, in the world of mathematics, is there a supersymmetrical system, geometric system, ever been produced in mathematics?
Yes. In math.
Yes. So this is what didn't happen on the previous podcast, where Mr. Howard will make a claim and someone who does know what they're talking about says, yes, that is true, or no, you're wrong. And this is important. And you start to see his demeanor. You start to see him get a little withdrawn, like maybe he doesn't have great universal insights. And I think that is part of a humbling process that does need to happen here. I have never learned more and simultaneously felt better than when I felt like I was thinking as hard as I've ever thought and thought I didn't know anything. when I was in graduate school and I was trying to come up with theories of communication and test them and write my thesis and stuff, I have never thought that I understood something less. And I was so lost. But that's where the education happens. When you break yourself all the way down and you have the right tools and you find yourself that pathway forward that makes sense. You don't come into these things with preconceived notions about what is true and what is beautiful and what is interesting. You do really have to be challenged. And I hope that breaks through to Mr. Howard a little bit. It does seem like he gets broken down a little bit. Where even this, I mean, I don't agree with Mr. Weinstein's politics or a lot of things that he has said, but he definitely made me feel like I don't understand the mathematics very well, and I don't. But we're trying to get at the basic points here. Binary Ghosts, thank you for the 10. I feel like Mr. Howard is trying to intersect occult philosophical concepts with our material scientific understanding and missed the mark on that rationalization, and now he's trying to force it forward. Yeah. I had a girlfriend who did that. 1930. Sacred geometry stuff sucks in a lot of smart people.
Terrence is coming from a polymathic perspective. He's all over the map in terms of the quality of his thinking.
Now, this is when Eric starts to get real. If someone started talking to me like this while I was still in the room, I don't know how I'd take it, but he's being very real with him here.
As far as I understand, some of his stuff is really, really good. Some of his stuff is offensive. And it's everything in between. Now, I'm not gunning for you.
No. I don't take that offensively.
Okay.
I take it in the fact that you're here. But let's get back to what I was saying about having, if my pieces naturally come together and form those same structure. Well, here we have.
How do they not, Eric?
I'm going to show him. Here's where 12 bubbles meet. If you go to the...
You can see Mr. Howard continuously retreating back into what he thinks is true. You look good for being nearly 100 years old, Kyle. Yeah. I mean, I am getting a little gray for 100. Liz Calvert gifting 5, one of our oldest members of the facility. Thanks for being here, Liz. I appreciate you. It's a spicy chat today, but we'll get through it. Let's continue forward because I lost my train of thought completely.
Magnetic field.
Yes.
Now, I don't have a clue why he says
Okay. So we need to go back just a little bit here.
That those faces have a...
Okay, so what the big thing about Mr. Howard's ideas here is that he thinks that these shapes unify a bunch of ideas in science. Okay, and at the apexes of these faces, at the points, at the vertices of these faces, they can be thought of as vortexes, and those vortexes can be thought of as electro and magnetic fields. And if you think of those electromagnetic fields as sound, then you can connect it to the periodic table of elements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when you speak to a scientist, this is the kind of response that you'd get, which is, why?
Clue. Why he says the next thing, which is, and because the number of magnetic and the number of electric things are balanced, they cancel out, and therefore it's the weak force. And to me, it's just like super cool stuff, and then suddenly...
Here we have those two tetraons on the end.
What just happened?
And then suddenly turns into horseshit.
But
that's why.
Listen, why? Here we have...
And that is the core of the problem here. Daitengu also gifting 5 memberships. Thank you. One of my oldest, one of my best. Daitengu, thank you for being here, brother. That is the essence here, right? Where you have some interesting, passionate ideas and some passion for education and trying to find something new. Thanks for being here, Tamaj. But then it just evolves into horseshit. Because you follow your own line of reasoning too far, and no one is checking you. Let's continue onwards here, because We're a little bit more than halfway through of my notes here, chat. So we got to keep going. I know there's a lot of you asking questions, but hopefully we'll have some time at the end. Okay.
Electricity is when.
Okay. So here, this clip, this is the essence of the problem, where he has no scientific grammar and he'll just say things that are bewildering, and this is why he doesn't get taken seriously.
Things that Victor Schauberger was talking about. Electricity it's when water starts to spin to the right, it cools down. That's the natural nature of electricity. Electricity is colder. It flows better in the coldest environment. So
yes, but
as it's cooling down, as it's spinning down to a higher point, trying to get to that higher point, that's the highest point there. It's looking for the highest density.
But what if it was...
That's the north. North is always the highest density.
But
south,
you define what north
no matter
is.
where you are, south is always away from the higher point. When you're talking about universally, not talking about geographically on the earth. North is always seeking a higher position. South is always seeking a lower position. That's based upon stuff that Walter Russell talked about, based upon the stuff that Victor Schauberger talked about. But it's a problem with the definition of the words, the terms.
Right, but your description of electromagnetic force and magnetism, like what is happening that it's bringing you to this conclusion?
This is a great question from Joe. Okay, you just said a bunch of crazy things. How does that imply this shape? How does following the axioms you're putting forward produce this shape naturally, as Howard will say many times?
You're so specifically saying that something that you literally can't even see with the human eye is happening very clearly.
I'm saying 4 magnetic fields are pushing in on that area.
I don't see magnetic fields. I see those spheres.
Would be magnetism. What does magnetism do? It expands out.
What brings you to the
radiation? Well, let's say radiative field. Let me use the term radiative field.
Do you know what we think electricity and magnetism are?
You think that it's the same thing?
No.
Part of the same force. They have them coupled together.
Jamie, could I ask you to find a Faraday tensor?
Okay, so he's basically going to have a lot of problems with the language here and the definitions. But Chad, we have to keep. I have to go forward another hour before I have something else interesting to say. Here we go. Right here. Domain of validity. Basically, the correct math science has to be applied to the correct medium. We can't multiply 2 whole cats for X. Yeah, he does bring that up. Oh, I get it now. The Earth isn't flat. The universe is. North is up. But says binary ghosts. Yeah, it's hard to say north is always up when you define what up is. What would be the most ethical way to engage with Terrence if we assumed... No, we can't assume that he has... I won't assume any mental illness about the man. That's not our place to do. We don't know him. Okay? But obviously engaging with him in a compassionate way is going to be better because he has a lot of his own ideas. So let's continue on here, chat.
Should be able to get something from a guy like me.
And that's what I did. I went to Oxford.
I know.
Didn't get that.
But I'm trying to say something.
Okay, go. Okay.
Then you do this other thing, which is...
See that? Did you see that little interaction? You see the armor starting to fall off just a little bit there.
Is you teach. And your teaching is not good. You tell us stuff that's not true, that we can tell is not true. And then we say, okay, I can throw out the entirety of what he's saying.
That's exactly what's happening here. Where if you come in to a field where people have spent their entire lives trying to figure something out, and you say, you're all wrong, I'm right, you are setting yourself up for failure. It doesn't really matter how smart you are or what you have to say if you lead with something like that. He's a teacher. No, he's Mr. Howard often approaches this like you're trying, like he's trying to teach you what he's already learned is true. you know?
Did I say that wasn't true though? That's what I'm. That's. I
Well,
mean,
1
my
times 1 is not equal to 2. Let's start there. In fact,
It's the smugness I often don't like.
I'm angry at Joe because Joe should have pushed back on that. Joe is in awe
The
of the way
calculator says 1 times 1 doesn't equal
He's right. Joe should have pushed back on that podcast. That's kind of the whole thing.
1 because of that square root of 2
Can we pull
issue.
the portal group back up?
There's a lot of wild shit I don't push back on if I'm not sure.
No,
Okay, now I think there's another important point coming here in
that
just a
person's
second.
saying.
I understand.
That's why. But also because I know that people are going to eventually
But Joe,
respond to it.
right now we've got a crisis where nobody knows what to believe in. Unfortunately
point.
for
I'm
you,
just
you
saying
were
there's
in a bad spot because you wanted to have fun. You had a show and it got really big.
He is absolutely right here. He is absolutely right here, where what Joe Rogan often does is he's hiding behind this, I'm just asking questions, I'm just talking about things, I'm just talking to who I want to talk to and smoking a cigar and having a good time. The problem is that this is not in a vacuum. He has millions and millions of listeners, and Eric is absolutely right. We are in a infodemic. In not only too much information, but an apocalypse of information, an infocalypse, where we coined by misinformation researcher Nina Schick, where not only can we not engage with everything that we find online or in the world, we disagree with almost all of it, or we can't decide what is true because we don't have the mental resources to go through everything. How could anyone? And Eric is absolutely right here. By platforming someone like Terrence with zero checks and balances on what he says, you are contributing to the problem. Because yes, in theory, if these two guys were just high, sitting in their hotel room, having a conversation about how shapes are colors and the periodic table, that's one thing. But if you have a hint of credibility that you're just asking questions, and then you put that out to millions and millions of people, you are contributing to the infodemic, right? You are. That's just true. A lot of podcasters, a lot of Twitter types will say that I'm just asking questions about COVID. I'm just asking questions about this, that, and the other thing. But you forget that when the idea of a town square meant something, the megaphone wasn't invented yet. The idea of a town square incorporates the idea that you have friends and family around you, living near you. You have people that know you. You have relationships with those people. You have people that you trust or don't trust. We don't have those anymore. Not everyone deserves a megaphone. It's not true. You know? I just had deja vu. Yeah, we did say a lot of this last time, but okay, fine, I'll move on. I was trying to make a point, but okay. Fine.
What I'm trying to get at is, that's what you're doing to us.
I didn't mean to. That's not what I meant to do. But in me saying 1 times 1 equals 2, like I said, that's a metaphor that there's some.
He's pulling back again from that claim that 1 times 1 equals 2. No, it's not a metaphor. You wrote a paper on it.
Something very wrong with the math because math should not be done.
Everyone does deserve a megaphone, says Bops Games. Why? 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 Let's take that out into the extreme. You know that there are things you could say because of free speech. No one is actually a free speech absolutist. They're not. Because we all agree, living in a society as we do, there are some things that you wouldn't want to tell everyone on earth all at once. Or there's some ideas that you don't want spreading that are detrimental to a society and to a civilization. You could make a free speech absolutist argument that I should be able to tell you how to make a bomb. I would argue that that speech is not protected. Come on. We live in a society. And I thought my jokes were bad. But there's some people that shouldn't be, their ideas don't need to become more numerous. You know what I mean? There are info hazards, as the chat is saying. You wouldn't, trust me, in a truly lawless free speech realm, you don't want to be there. We have norms and checks and balances and even laws that try to produce, somewhat unsuccessfully, of course, an information ecosystem that we want to be in. You would not want to be in the Wild West of speech. You wouldn't. You say that you would, but I think you're lying to yourself. I think you can easily think of examples where you wouldn't.
Wrong with the math.
I'm saying the math that we are doing is still based on linear projections, even though we are in a multi-dimensional space. And if the square root of 2 didn't have that problem,
Terrence, listen to me very carefully. Assume you have the most beautiful curved linear object.
my wife.
Yeah. Can we do a form?
timing.
I don't want to talk about. I don't want my words about.
It's a good joke. BP TV 499. I think we were looking at the flower of life diagram as one-dimensional flat object. The dodecahedron shows that it's not flat. Yeah, it's kind of what he's getting at. But like I said, Chet, there is a freedom of speech aspect to this, and obviously I'm not a politician, or I don't advocate for these things or not. But that in extremis, there are situations where not everyone deserves a microphone. That's all I wanted to say about that. We're almost done, chat. Skip ahead another hour. Over an hour, I think. Yeah. Because this is when stuff starts to get real. This is when Eric really does start to lay it out pretty clear for Mr. Howard here.
Science documentaries that came afterwards. So the answer is no.
So, for context here, he asked Neil deGrasse Tyson if he'd talk to him, if he would talk to Eric about his own theories. And this is when we start getting into the complicated history of peer review.
Let me explain where you are. Neil is not unaware that you are never going to get your hearing in a peer-reviewed journal. Your ideas are going to come through. You're a self-taught, autodidact polymath. You haven't been cleaned up. You haven't been taught how to speak properly. You don't know the fact that when you say loop, we know fixed point. I know how to do all this stuff, right? You're not getting a peer review from me. I know a lot more than you do about a lot of this stuff. You're getting an elite review.
Now, this is interesting. This is kind of when we're going to start to see some more of Eric's opinions on this kind of stuff. But it's interesting that he's being pretty harsh with him here. But it's true. And some of you are saying elitist, or he's being condescending. No, what he's doing, this is in contrast to what Neil deGrasse Tyson did, right? Scott Burrows, thank you for the $9.99. Man, I dig the way you go about this. Thank you. So what Neil did, basically, which I thought I liked, was how Neil, at the end of his video response to Mr. Howard, said, basically, present your ideas through peer review, and then we'll see if it's right. But what Eric is saying is that if you live in the real world, no actual scientist, no actual university is going to listen to Mr. Howard. No one's going to give him peer review. They're not going to give him the time of day because he doesn't look right. He doesn't sound right. He has very weird ideas, many of which are not true. And so Eric is saying Tyson is being disingenuous because he knows no one is going to actually give him peer review. And I think that is a good point. I mean, that's true, right? And then Eric goes on to say how good and interesting it is to just have a space for open conversation like this, even if it can get a little harsh, as Daramuth is saying with the 2. Thank you so much. But there is a point there, right? Where someone like Mr. Howard is never going to have a published paper in a respected journal. And to say that, oh, just do that, that is a little disingenuous, right? But we'll expand on that a little bit further here.
And my elite review says that a lot of this is bathwater, but a small amount of this is baby. And that's not available anywhere. It's not available in a university. It's not available in a journal. That's available on the Joe Rogan Experience.
In this particular episode. And yeah, no, that so Eric has a lot of thoughts about the declining status of academia in the United States, and what he speaks about at length is how peer review is often used by scientists to steal other people's work, or to get other people to leave the department, or shun their ideas. And I know a lot of that is true. There's a lot of flaws in academia where the system can be abused by all too human people. And I think in pointing out how, as some of you in the chat were saying, how Neil kind of just passed the buck there, I think that's important. I think that is an actual real world evaluation. But having an open 4-hour conversation on a podcast is not necessarily the way forward either. Man, I dig. Nope, got that. Thank you, Scott. Your cheap date with the 10. Been watching your content for a very long time. Never joined or contributed. Really like what you're up to. Thank you, cheap date. I will buy you a drink later. Let's continue because we're almost through it, chat. And this is kind of where the tragedy of education thing that I mentioned at the beginning comes in, which kind of changed my mind a little bit.
Having the proof. And then, mind you, like Jamie, if you pull up the...
but Terrence, you know what he's saying about like not being an expert in teaching and then coming from the outside?
Now, this is important. This is why won't people listen to Mr. Howard? And Joe is going to try to get this across to him. Do you know why people treat you and your ideas the way that they do?
And that it's insulting. It's insulting. It's insulting. It's a bad way to approach a concept, because the people that have been studying these concepts for so long instantaneously are told that they don't know, but you know. And that's offensive to people that are actual experts in a thing. I think the same ideas could be portrayed in a way that does not do that.
I have to learn that nomenclature.
It's just you're so much smarter.
I think that's real progress. I mean, who knows if he's going to take any of this to heart? But it has to be said, chat. You recognize that for someone who was so smug about his ideas in the last podcast, for him to totally flip and say, "You're right, it is insulting the way I'm going about it, and I do have to learn the nomenclature and that scientific grammar like I was talking about." Right? I mean, that's not nothing. Whether or not you believe him or not, whether or not he is a good actor, whether or not you think he's acting, or he's, as some of you are saying, he's getting, he's actually seething or anything, there is, on the face of it, progress in that little moment. And in this day and age, Chad, I'll take whatever I can get, to be honest.
Harder than most of the people you're talking to. Well, that's what the problem is.
And this is one of the failures of...
Okay, so we'll that gets more into the academia point, but I thought that was actually pretty powerful to see someone who is so enamored with their own ideas being like, you know what, maybe I am going about this the wrong way. That's hard to do. That's hard to do. Kurt V with the 10. Could the argument be made that then peer review shouldn't be gate kept on the premise of scientific grammar, as you're saying? Maybe science should be a little bit more accessible, says Kurt. Well, no, Kurt, there's still a barrier to entry. Like, you still, if you want to introduce a new idea in particle physics or something like that, you first must be understood, and people have to understand you too. The real Chad way to do it would be, like what an Einstein did, or what like an Isaac Newton did, where learn the ways of science, become a scientist, and then propose something radical that is confirmed by experiment time and time and time again, and then changes your whole understanding of the universe. Not your whole understanding of the universe, but you know what I mean. Where we don't, why Einstein is so important, and why he's a term of, why he's an adjective these days, is because Einstein did something incredible. Introduce a scientific worldview and theory, general and special relativity, in a short, concise, few pages, and it changed our whole understanding of the universe. And none of that, none of Einstein's work, people are saying, well, it's basically like, we need like a cipher and hieroglyphics to figure this out. We have no idea what he's talking about, but that idea was cool. No, everyone knew what he was talking about. Make your idea so obviously true that it changes people. That's what science does. That's what, I don't like the idea, but I have to agree with it. Good science, you should be able to hate the idea, but agree with the conclusion. And that's what Einstein was like with quantum mechanics. Where Einstein didn't like a lot of stuff that came out of quantum mechanics, but he couldn't deny. It's like, I don't like this spooky action at a distance, but QED. That's good. Become undeniable, as Rogan says. Yeah. I mean, I say, when I tell people, because the only thing I'm an expert in, chat, I guess, is trying to talk about science and stuff. And what I say, I bring up a quote from Carlos Santana, one of the best guitarists of all time. Maybe not technically, but what you cannot deny is that when Carlos Santana starts playing, you know it's Santana. And what he said was, play the guitar in a way that even your grandma will know who's playing over the radio or whatever. Make your truth undeniable, but you have to speak everyone else's language, or else they're not going to be able to deny it in the first place. One of the biggest issues, says Binary Ghost with the 20, thank you, is that modern institutions have a problem of credibility and trust with the public these days. Yes, absolutely. We have a crisis of expertise, especially in this country, and that adds to this whole conversation. Kyle, been a longtime fan since Because Science. Thank you for being a beacon of shining light in today's world. Oh, that's just the argan oil shining off the hair. Liz Calvert, of course, with the 5. Kyle, before you go, can my tiny human get a shout out for keeping his cool today? That was big progress for him. Alex, you did a great job today. I'm proud of you, buddy. But let's finish this out, chat. I'm rambling a little bit.
And as far as I can tell, what you need is some discipline. And you need discipline from coming into contact with people who know a lot more than you, who can educate you as to what we already understand, how to communicate those things.
And not just shut them down.
It's
well, that's
what
the
happened.
thing.
I think he's absolutely right. And so when I said that my view of Mr. Howard kind of changed a little bit, is I do think there is a failure. There's a tragedy of education here, right? Where imagine if Mr. Howard, who's putting all this energy into trying to get patents and make models and go and talk at universities, et cetera, make his own websites about these ideas and trying to get them published, yada, yada, yada. Imagine if all of that was filtered through a great teacher and a great thinker or a great university, and was able to point that creativity in the right direction. Imagine what he could actually accomplish. And so by not having that, I think you have a very rich, very privileged man who came up with his own ideas in isolation, and he had no contact with reality on them. but think of what he could have done, right? And so I do think that is kind of a tragedy, a little bit. He lacks the brain power. And I don't think so. I mean, he's obviously, he thinks a lot about these things. What if that was all focused into a tight gamma burst-like beam, you know? Instead, he's just a narcissist. Look, Chet, I'm giving the best possible situation here. I'm not saying, again, he has other problems going on in his life. Kyle, what are your thoughts on what Eric said? He says this a little later on. We're almost done here, Chet. What are your thoughts on what Eric said a little later on, where he says we have an epidemic of scientific specialization, and there are too few people trying to connect the fields like there used to be. I think that's valid. I'm not in academia. I was only in higher education for a little bit, doing my graduate school work. But I think that's valid. He actually brings up something that I've brought up, something that other science communicators have brought up, where everyone thinks that like the craziest best science, craziest best physics right now is like string theory, where I understand that most academics in physics think there's very little to string theory and that we're wasting time on it. And there's too many people working on it and it's too specialized and they just spend all day, you know, just speaking their own language but not really making any progress and not really doing anything. There's too much focus on that. And so I could see it as a point that people do get too specialized and they go down their own rabbit holes and they never see sunlight again, you know? Now, Mr. Weinstein will connect this to other things that I don't agree with. But I think he has a point there. And he brings up because we get so specialized, because there's so many journals now, scientific journals, we have a problem of replication in science where we tend to not publish the negative evidence studies and we only publish the ones that are going to give us some credit and some clout and all these human factors that make science very hard to do today. I think those are all valid things to bring up.
In order to get to defining curved space.
I think that the real story, Terrence, is going to be whether you can stop teaching long enough to accept some help.
I'm
That is a real problem. I mean, if you go to graduate school or you go to any sort of intense learning, a place of intense learning, Chat, you really have to surrender yourself to the process, and be willing to be incorrect and to feel dumb and to ask a lot of questions. There's nothing more rewarding that I've done in my life, really, than spend a couple years thinking harder than I've ever thought about anything. And that was humbling and it was hard, but at the end it feels good. Giggity. Almost done here, chat. Two more sections. Oh, I chose the wrong clip. That's fine. One more. Let's go to one more here.
Sphere packing people, they're combinatorists. They're where to send you. There's a guy alive and hadn't been.
Okay, so this is what he's saying about you have a better possibility of being of interest to engineers than to mathematicians. And this is what we mentioned with like the packing of spheres and having those cool shapes.
Killed by COVID. I'd know where to send you. There's a guy, there are sphere packing people. There are combinatorists. There are all sorts of people who play with stuff in this realm. But the one thing that you've got to stop doing is that when you get on a program that has millions of people, you can't create one more mass delusion. I've got a Fauci mass delusion. I've got a string theory mass delusion. I've got a Biden is fine mass delusion. I've got a Trump is not a problem mass delusion.
Okay, Chad, don't do what I think you're going to do. Don't comment on any of that last stuff. Don't do it. Don't do it. I'm not going to talk about that. Don't do it. Don't do it. This is why when people were asking at the beginning, why are you talking about Eric's politics? It's don't do it. That's not what I don't want to get into that. I don't want to do it. Don't do it. Chat, don't do it. I forgot to press pause. Don't do it. But that was a good thing to say. Forget the last part. But that was a good thing to say. Don't go on a program with millions of people and create more delusions in our already polluted information ecosystem. That has basically been my argument through both of these videos now, which is not everyone deserves a megaphone, because we are in a situation today, in an information ecosystem today, that is so polluted, people don't know what's real anymore. And when people stop believing what's real or disagree about what's real, that has real socio-political consequences. And I can say, without getting into anything, you know you're feeling those consequences right now, right? And sometimes it's not worth doing the I'm just asking questions routine, because that's not actually what you're doing. You're trying to undermine. You're trying to soften up the foundation of our collective epistemology. And I think that is dangerous. But you know it's not dangerous, chat? You and me, baby. Woo! Man, that was a lot. Let's get the music back in here, huh? Chat. That was that. It's time to now clear up any lingering questions you may have for yours truly. We can talk about it. But that's interesting, right? I think, as I said, you can see, you can see me, but you can see that there was a slight character arc there. There was possibly some growth, and what I much prefer, if it's going to be a Joe Rogan podcast like this, is to have someone there to focus people's ideas into a conversation that can be actually productive. Good ideas need to be challenged. If your idea cannot be challenged because it will disintegrate at the lightest poke or prod, then it's not a very good idea, is it? Koopa in the chat, glad I don't have to watch the original pod. You know, I watch I'd say I watch 95% of it. The first one was very hard to watch. The second one was much better. God damn, I love epistemology, says David Free. Calm down, dude. Much love, Kyle. Thank you for being here, James. You're turd polishing. No. I just got here. Can we start over? Yep, sure. One sec. Chat. That'd be crazy. Chat, that'd be crazy. How did you convince Thor to take your likeness? Oh, I took one of his kids hostage. At least Terrence didn't talk much. He spent most of the time drinking whiskey. And, I mean, I skipped over a good, 4 hours. What do you think we have a mass delusion of string theorists, like Weinstein says? Well, that's kind of what I said, where people, Ali Costero, a brand new science communicator on YouTube, look her up. She is really, really good. I'm going to put it in the chat. She's in the field of physics, of high energy, I don't know what's high energy physics. But she has a video about string theory and basically why it's captured the public consciousness, and now there's a bunch of bad science communication going on, and that's bad because yeah, here it is. I'm gonna put it in the chat now. This is a very good video, and she's really good. Go give her some love. But here it is in the chat. String theory lied to us, and now science communication is hard is the name of the video. She's quite good. And so when you say like there's a mass delusion of string theorists, it's basically that there's very few good things coming out of string theory that are actionable, and we're spending too much time and resources and focusing too much on it. Mr. Howard is to be complimented for the geometrical art presented. Says Shantanu with the 5. I mean, the stuff he makes is beautiful. It's just the meaning that he's implying is incorrect. Good ideas need to be challenged, says my new favorite quote. That's my new favorite quote, says Alicia. I'm sure I'm not the first one to say something like that. You must learn the rules before you break them, says Luca with the 10. I like that quote. I, Kyle, will now talk about all that fun political stuff. No, no, we're not going to do that. Chat, was that helpful today? I know we've done 2 of these now, and what I've tried to do is give the additional outside context to these discussions, because millions of people do listen to Joe, and a lot of people do think Howard is onto something or has interesting ideas or shouldn't be characterized the way he's being characterized. If this is useful and or helpful, it's pretty good. You triggered me. God. Please, I just want to ask, because I'm scared life is infinite, says Nebula. Don't worry. It's not. I enjoy this scrutiny. I feel enlightened. This was Poggers. Keck W. It's good to see your growth as well on this subject. Yeah, I mean, I was, I don't remember what I said last time, but I may have been too dismissive. Where I didn't take the alternate route, which Eric did, and try to, okay, well, let's find the interesting stuff in here and focus on that. Alex, thank you for the $4.99. Thanks, Science Thor. Why do they call it string theory and not string hypothesis? This is Philistine with the 10. That's a good point. As far as I can tell, it's all mathematical and not experimental right now. Love you've been following for a while, says Gabriel Rhodes. Please find more excuses to bring Star Trek tech into explanations. Yeah, what do you want to know? It was very good, because theory sounds more manly. Yes, I think too dismissive last time. Something felt off. Yeah, I mean, I thought I tried to be as nice as I could, but yeah, it was the first podcast appearance of his is difficult because it's 3 hours of him saying a bunch of very hard to understand things. Apple Mac with the 10. Would you be interested in visiting a fusion energy company? I work for one of the most public ones. Send me an email, Apple Mac. Your check and balance is to try to find my email. Will you ever visit CERN? I'd love to. It says Bingus. Actually, I'm going to be traveling overseas next month to check out thorium nuclear reactors and that technology. I know a lot of you have asked me about thorium. And so we're going to go check it out in person next month. A thorium research lab, whatever that means. First time catching this live. Mind saying hi to my sister Nicole in Liverpool. This is Jay Paykert with the $4.99. Nicole in Liverpool, I think you're just the tops of the tops. But at the top, it's north, and north is more dense, obviously, because when water flows to the right, it cools down. It's hard to be nice about that. Like, that whole paragraph was very... Like, it's the combination of the matter-of-fact attitude with the really bizarre things that make it hard to, you know... Kyle, Terrence kept bringing up patents that he has. What do patents do in the science community? Nothing. Patents don't do nothing. You can patent an idea, but that doesn't speak to its efficacy or its truth, or whether or not it works. It's just a legally distinct idea. It doesn't mean it's a good one. Kyle, is hydrogen power the future? It's an interesting part of the future. Yeah, I was at Idaho National Laboratory a couple weeks ago, and I saw some of the stuff they were doing with hydrogen, and it was quite interesting. What happens when water flows to the left? Well, it goes down and it gets hotter. Any hair care tips before you go? Argan oil. Tell us one of your patents, says Blue Waffle. I don't have any. I don't need to patent it. Think about that. Think about that. Have you ever met Electro Boom? Yes, I met him also a couple weeks ago at Open Source. Nice guy. Oh yeah, so Bass, are you working on any new ideas in the Half-Life Histories series? Yes, I am. Coming up, so if you liked anything that we do here on the main channel, we just released a video about Elden Ring. Go check that out if you like Elden Ring and you want to learn some more about physics and space-time while you do so. Oh, it's the best place to do it. Coming up at the facility, next video is going to be about AI and the internet. And no surprise, I'm a little bit doomery about it. That's going to be there. But the next Half-Life History specifically, I think is going to be about the secret plan to destroy the Nazis' atomic bomb program. And I filmed part of that in Germany. That's already been filmed. That will come your way soon. But we also have some other more recent technological kind of things. We're going to do a video about the economics of nuclear power that I've never gotten into, but I wanted to get into. Yeah, we have a lot of nuclear historical stuff coming up because I know that's what you all actually want. Master of All with the Australian $10. Hey Kyle, hope you're doing good. I'm curious how you feel about the way that Numberphile presented the whole sum of all natural numbers equals negative 1/12 thing. The use of the word equals bugged me. I'd have to watch it. I've seen many mathematician-like videos. I've seen many educator videos about the fact that the sum of all those numbers equals negative 1/12, but I haven't looked into it myself. Yeah. The nuclear content does the best for us here at the facility, so I know I need to do a lot more of it, but sometimes I like to geek out about other things, like Terrence Howard and video games. You know? Why is the Discord not working on Patreon? It should. If you sign up at the appropriate level, you'll find a link to my benefits, and then it'll give you a link to the Discord. It's the nerdiest Discord on the internet, chat. So what did we learn, everyone? Exactly. Chat, coming up at the facility, we have video about AI and the internet. We have a video about bugs. I love bugs. Video about the most important chart in physics, nuclear economics, more Half-Life histories about secret Nazi war programs. We have another episode about Fallout and the most important chemical in Fallout. A story about one of the first commercial applications of radium, which relates to the radium girls, etc., etc. A lot of cool stuff coming up, chat. And if you want to stay in touch with everything that we're doing, of course, that is subbing on this main channel. If you want to check out gaming streams, we have a big announcement coming up there on the second channel a little bit later on when we get to it. But chat, all these yellow things. Cheetah Duck with a $9.99. Is it possible to have cars fully powered from solar panels getting infinite miles during the day? X being the number of hours it's getting power from the sun. No. The actual energy that is generated in real time by the solar panels is not enough to run your car. The solar panels are charging batteries that run your car. And to have I'll put it this way, to have solar panels alone give you like the torque of a Tesla or something, you would need to have I don't know, we could do the math on this, but you need to have a giant array, an enormous array on the back of your car. It wouldn't look anything like a sunroof. So infinite miles doesn't work practically, just because the engineering of the thing wouldn't work. And then it's probably too heavy. You probably have a rocket situation where the number of panels gets so heavy that the car needs to be more powerful, so it needs more panels to get that power, and then those more... See where I'm going? See where I'm going with that? Kyle, would the VOD be this available live straight after the stream? Yes. Why aren't you on Joe Rogan? I'm not famous enough. I was a solar tech. See, we have so many amazing nerds in the chat. I was a solar technician. You only get about 9 kilowatts per hour, at best 20. Yeah, not really enough to run your Tesla. Oh yeah, Dyson spheres. Neil deGrasse Tyson did a video on that. I would go on Joe Rogan in a heartbeat. But again, I'm not famous enough. Chat. I hope you learned something. I hope I was educational. I probably said some things that are wrong or off the top of my head. I apologize for that. Of course, you can always connect with me in the comments below and say what I got wrong or what I got right or what was interesting. Chat, join me later on at the facility if you want to ping me about anything and everything. Find your way there. All you have to do is get through the blast doors. So chat, if you can find your way to the blast doors, until I see you there, have a wonderful rest of your day, night, week, month, even your year. And I'll see you on the next video, live stream, game stream, social media post. And be nice to each other, because this is all we got. See you soon.